Welcome to the Alden House, home of the descendants of John and Priscilla Alden. John and Priscilla were two of the original colonists to brave the trip to the New World and later helped establish the town of Duxbury. Today, the Aldens have over 1 million descendants all over the world. In fact, you could be one of them. On this tour, you'll get a glimpse of how people lived before the age of technology and how they made a place for themselves in a completely new continent. To know where we came from, it's important to learn about America's origins, which the Aldens played a big role in creating. This is especially true of Duxbury's origins, because it's the very same town they founded. Before we begin the tour, you'll need to know about the history of John and Priscilla and who they were before they moved to America, which I'll try to cover in less than a minute. Ready? Go! The Mayflower sailed to America from England and landed on Plymouth in 1620. On board were 102 passengers, including 21-year-old John Alden and teenage Priscilla Mullins. John Alden worked as a cooper on the Mayflower, which means he was in charge of making and repairing wooden barrels, which stored the food and drink. Priscilla Mullins was the daughter of a shoemaker who came to America hoping to sell shoes in the New World. Along with her father, Priscilla came with her mother, brother, and the family servant. Unfortunately, they all died in the first winter, and Priscilla was left an orphan. A few years after this tragedy, John and Priscilla got married and moved from Plymouth with a few other families to make a new town called Duxbury, and then obtained their own plot of land found here. Today, their house will be found right next door to Alden Elementary School. They built their original house in the 1630s, where they raised their 10 children in a house that was tiny compared to our homes today. It only had one room. The house I'm standing in front of is over 300 years old, and the one we'll be touring today. It was built by John and Priscilla's children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. This house went through 3 iterations. In the first version, the house had only 2 rooms, the great room downstairs and the bedroom upstairs. As their family grew larger, so did their need for space, and many rooms were added and renovated in the 1700s. The third and final addition was the new L kitchen added in the 1800s. Since then, the house has remained the same with some preservation done and has been turned into the museum we show today. And with that being said, let's begin the tour! During the winter season, most of the furniture is covered or stored away, but you can see what the room would normally look like in photos we took last summer. Walking through the front door, the room immediately to the right is the Great Room, one of the 2 original rooms of the house. Because of the previously mentioned renovations, the only visible remaining parts of the original room are the summer beam and the chimney girt beam, which help support the frame of the house. This room was like today's everything purpose room because it was literally used for everything. Cooking, eating, playing, sleeping, you name it, and it probably happened in this room. Walking upstairs, you'll find the second of the original rooms, the bedroom. This is where the children would sleep while the parents slept downstairs in the Great Room. Being an only child was practically unheard of back in those days, so kids would almost always have to share the room with their brothers and sisters. And not just 1 or 2 siblings, sometimes they'd have to share a single bed between several kids if they were even lucky enough to have a bed. Talk about cramped! This is also where the baby would sleep, who was typically taken care of by one of the daughters of the family. This room is also well known for one of the mysteries of the house, a strange square hole found in the middle of the room. It has since been sealed up, but as you can see, the hole led right down to the Great Room. To this day, historians don't know what this hole was used for. Was it to share the heat from the fire downstairs? Or perhaps it was some sort of makeshift laundry chute? Or maybe, just maybe, a secret spy hole? We may never know the true answer. Continuing through the upstairs, there is a side room that displays a few items children used back then. When they first came to America, the Pilgrims didn't have any time to build schools, so every kid was homeschooled by their parents. To learn counting skills, they'd use an abacus, which is a counting frame that used small stones to solve math problems by sliding them across metal rods. To learn how to read, they used this device called a hornbook, which taught them the English alphabet and the Lord's Prayer. Along with the learning tools, another important appliance sits in the corner of this room. Can anyone guess what this is? If you guessed a toilet, you'd be right. Every house would have what is called a chamber pot, and this is where they'd use the bathroom. Bad news for anyone with older siblings. The chamber pot was usually cleaned by the youngest child. If you're the youngest in your family, be glad you weren't born 400 years earlier. Moving onward, the next room is the women's workroom. This is where the women and young girls of the family would be spinning while moving back and forth between the kitchen downstairs. They mainly worked with 2 materials, wool and flax. Shearing wool from the sheep, they would use big spinning wheels to create yarn, which was helpful to trade with, knit socks and mittens, and more. Flax, on the other hand, was a bit different. Although it looks similar to hay or straw, it's actually a flowering plant. Flax would go through a long process shown here to be made into linen, which is a very soft material compared to the rough plant it's made from. You can normally find linen today used as sheets for your bed. This room also holds an interesting story. Many years ago, the house was owned by 2 brothers, Henry and Jack. The house was given to them by their mother, who we call Aunt Polly. Unfortunately, the 2 brothers hated each other and refused to share the house together. Aunt Polly wouldn't budge, though, and told both of them they owned half the house. They took this very literally and built a wall through the middle of the house. You can see the differences between the brothers in the walls of this room. On the right, Jack renovated his side by painting the walls and adding wallpaper, while Henry kept everything the same on the left. Now that's what I call sibling rivalry. And the rest of the upstairs on Henry's side is his large bedroom with a closet and Aunt Polly's smaller bedroom attached to his. Moving downstairs to the room across from the great room is the parlor. This is where the family would entertain guests, typically with tea parties. It's also where samplers made by Alden descendants are displayed. A sampler is an embroidery or cross-stitch made by a young girl to teach her not only sewing but reading and writing skills. For example, Rachel Alden, the woman in the painting, wrote Rachel Alden, age 9, October 24th, my property. She really called dibs on this house at an early age. The next room is the kitchen, the other room that you could always find the women and their daughters working in. Now you may be wondering, if the women are working so much in the house, where are the men? The men would be out in the fields, farming the food that the women would cook and taking care of the animals, while the boys helped by chopping wood. Men were in charge of the outdoor labor, while women were in charge of taking care of the house and family. There was always something cooking in the fireplace, from a piece of meat on the spit to something boiling in the pot. They used a lot of the same cooking methods that we do today, frying, roasting, boiling, and baking, but with very different tools. For example, this was their frying pan, which was called a spider because of the 3 legs sticking out of the bottom. And can anyone guess what this is? It may not look like it, but this was a toaster. A piece of bread would go into each slot and they'd toast it near the fire. In the back of the fireplace is a bake oven, which would slowly cook food behind a closed wooden door. Moving to the other side of the kitchen is even more equipment to assist the busy woman. Across from the fireplace is this strange piece of furniture. Some may think it's a laundry hamper or a mailbox, but it's actually a playpen for a baby. This is helpful to keep a close eye on the baby and keep them away from the fire. Next to the playpen is a large wooden wash tub used for laundry and baths. Unlike many of us today, people long ago didn't bathe very often, but when they did, they would fill the tub up with water heated by the fire, and the entire family would clean themselves using the same water. First the father would bathe, then the mother, and then the oldest to the youngest child. So if you're the baby of the family, sorry, but it looks like you'll be using dirty water. This tool is a butter churn, which was used to turn cream into butter by pouring the liquid into the churn and repeatedly moving a plunger with a disc attached to it up and down. This entire process would take at least an hour and a lot of upper body strength. The final room is the L kitchen, which was used to cook during the summer so that the fire wouldn't heat up the entire house. Today, we use it to display artifacts found in an archaeological dig done at the site of the first house that John and Priscilla lived in. Some artifacts found in this dig include scissors, a fishing hook, a horseshoe, tweezers, and pieces of china. Archaeologists also found parts of a snap-ons musket, a gun fork, and a pike head. Gun forks were used to prop the musket on while shooting because it was too heavy to hold. A pike head was like a spear, and it was attached to a pole that was 20 feet long. Some other interesting artifacts found include parts of a clay pot, a ring, and arrowheads from Native Americans that previously lived on this land. And finally, exiting through the side door of the L, our tour is finished. Thank you for joining us. We're glad you could virtually experience the tour. If you'd like to see the house in person, come visit us this summer. We'll give you a full walk around the house and tell you even more about the house and the people who lived in it. The Alden family has generations full of fascinating stories that I unfortunately didn't have time to talk about in this tour, so I highly encourage all of you to learn more about them yourselves. Like I said in the beginning of this tour, there's a chance you could be one of the millions of descendants of John and Priscilla, so you may find that their history is more personal than you think. Once again, it was a pleasure giving you this tour, and thank you from the Alden Kindred of America.